everybody, and thank you for joining our Be Women Weekly Dialogues or webinars. You really made a great choice of being with us for the next 50 minutes. This call will be inspiring, not only inspiring, but really create action of how to make the world a better place for us, for our kids, for our grandkids, and for the future, for all of us. And for the first few minutes, I will tell you more about Be Women. Then Lucia Todd, that is abogada de Mexico and master's in Georgetown and currently president in Mexico of Todos con los Infancia y Jóvenes, an amazing force of good to create action in education in Mexico. And then our speaker, Leslee Udwin, that I love, and I think you are doing the most amazing things to make the world a better place. We'll talk about how Think Equal is really impacting our young kids. And she will speak for 30, 20, 40 minutes, and then we'll open to questions. So let's get started. So I'm Laura Yaduru Koch, founder of Be Women, and very passionate about the B Corp movement that over 10 years ago, my company, Bodegas Zolium in Argentina, got certified. I'm also an impact investor and corporate lawyer licensed in Argentina and the state of New York. So what is Be Women? We are a global network of business women that advocate for triple bottom line economies. What we mean is the triple win economies where companies balance social, environmental, and profits. And they basically balance these three things so that really this can move forward. And our network is about focus on these two burning issues in our society, that is gender equality and climate change. And we collaborate hundreds of thousands of women worldwide with the conviction that to leave behind economies of winners and losers, and to advance businesses that focus on values, on collaboration, on care, respect for nature, dignity, what we many describe as the feminine values or the right side values or advocates. So as Be Women, how do we do this? We raise awareness through webinars like this one on a weekly basis, networking, meeting, because when women meet, magic happens. And we also develop collaborate projects that are local in different cities that are one better than the other. So what differentiates us from other networks is that each year we define specific measurable goals, because whatever is measured gets done, no? And whatever we measure, we can change. And so this year we have chosen to measure ourselves and all the members to inspire 3 new companies to do the business management tool called the B Impact Assessment from B Lab. We support 3 new companies to do the BIA. So one last thing is that we, Be Women, have a move called the Empowering Move, that is to put your shoulders back, lift your chin up, make your eyes sparkle, and with a wide smile, we like to ask Lucia Todd to really tell us about all she knows about the Leslee and continue this conversation.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much, and thank you. I am honored to introduce Leslee today from Think Equal. She, for me, I can tell you she's an inspiring human being that has this amazing contagious energy, and her passion has given results for me in Mexico, at least, or in everywhere. And she gives me enormous, a sense of hope for a better tomorrow, like you were saying earlier on. She's an instrument of love and equality in this world. And I have been a part of many social projects during, not only with my now organization, but even before with work with my husband, even with my parents all my life. And I have been a witness of the needs that children have, especially here in Mexico. Now, I come from a family that has always been involved in education and in social projects. And I am very aware that the most powerful weapon to change the world is education. But for me, even though we know that education is the answer, for me, it has always been about the how and about the where do I start, And Leslee, in my experience, what she has put together is the most grounded, the most accurate program required for children to grow in a more connected, in a more equal, in a more kind, compassionate, tolerant world. So when I met her, I was, I was very excited. I already knew about her, but I was very excited to see that the person that I thought I knew about, she was even 100 times more energetic and more passionate and more, I don't know, engaged with the children. And she just really inspired me. So, well, in Mexico, we have, in Monterrey, the program began in August 2018 in 14 preschools. Now it's in over 60 preschools here in the state of Nuevo León. And it's been going on also, it's opening every time more in different states in Mexico. Now we have it in about 4 to 5 states. And in Nuevo León, Congress just started the first funding for it to, to go to every preschool. So it amazes me now that she has it in, I think, 14 countries now. And in Mexico, it is growing every day. We believe, and we have witnessed what the program can do. We have witnessed what it does for the teachers, because the teachers are so inspired with this program and they feel so empowered, because they know that the kids, the children's lives, that the world is, in their hands. So that makes them feel very engaged and very, they have a big compromise with Think Equal. Of all the organizations that I have worked with, and I have worked with a lot of very, very amazing organizations, I can just tell you that I would want nothing more in the world and for my children and for every person, for them to have the opportunity and the right to have this program, to have Think Equal. So I think they have the right to grow in an equal world, in a compassionate world, in a kind and loving world. And that is what Leslee is all about. And that is what Think Equal is all about. So I think this is the only way that we can, have a great, better world. So I am glad to introduce to you Leslee, my friend, and Leslee from Think Equal. Hi, Leslee.
Hi, Lucia. Thank you so much for those eloquent and very kind words. I mean, you have been extraordinarily supportive and fortifying. You're one of those exceptional people who understand that there's a mission here, appreciate what the mission is, and dive in. And you've done that with all your heart and all your soul. And I admire you and am inspired by you for doing just that, because what Think Equal is doing, Mujeres B, what Think Equal is doing is global. And if it's not global, it's of no worth. We believe every single child in this world has the right to be given that foundation that will enable that child to go on to lead a dignified life, a life that respects the dignity of others, and to have the tools to do that with. That is the crux of Think Equal. And we can't do it without an army of amazing people all around the world, like Lucia. And we're not in silos here or there, a fire here and there. This has to be a fire that consumes the entire world and rids us of discrimination and violence. That is one of the main objectives of this program. And the reason I say that is because of the cradle in which this program was born. And it came from a very unusual journey and trajectory. Nothing in my life could have prepared me to believe that I would be giving every waking second I have, as I do, to an NGO and its mission. I started life determined that I would be an actor, and I was for many years. I then got bored with that because I thought, what am I doing just interpreting other people's ideas and stories, and became a film producer of feature films. And I did that very happily, very successfully. I won the British Oscar for one of my films. It was financially very successful, everything one could sort of dream of. Well, the next thing I did changed my life forever and turned me away from everything I knew that was to do with a career, an ambition for myself, you know, dreams of fame and making money, and made me really understand absolutely what my purpose on this earth is. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful every day of my life for that, because I have never been happier. I've never been more productive or more useful to the children of this world, which is now all I'm bent upon. And let me tell you what began this. So at the end of making many feature films, I suddenly was moved for the first time in my career as a filmmaker to make a documentary. And what moved me to do that was the sight of hundreds of thousands of men and women on the streets of India's cities in December 2015. And what had brought them there in extraordinary, courageous, impassioned protests was a very brutal and horrific gang rape of a young medical student on a moving bus in Delhi. And as I say that, I bet many of you will that case, because it really did explode across our world with this utmost brutality and vileness. These 6 men had gang raped this young girl until, and I'm sorry to say this, but we must be alert to what happens here, until her intestines were hanging out of her body. And they threw her naked and bleeding on the side of the highway to die. And she did die 13 days later. What took me to India to make this film wasn't that rape as much as the sight of extraordinarily impassioned fighting for justice for her, and, passionately screaming at the authorities anymore. And rather naively at the time, I actually thought, wow, this is the beginning of the end of violence against women. This protest, why did I think that about a mere protest, you might ask? Because protests generally, as we know them, last a day and they pass. This was different. Here were people who did not go home. They went on and on, day after day, and this actually went on for more than 1 month. Can you imagine? Millions of people on the streets. I genuinely thought, naively I know now, that protest was going to lead to something critical and important for women and girls. Well, I went to India to make this film, which had to, of course, be a documentary. And while I'm there, I'm thinking there is no point in the world in making this film just as a campaigning film, just to amplify the voices of the protesters, which is what I believed I was there to do. If I cannot sit with the men who did that to her, sit with those men who pulled her intestines out of her body, and find out what kind of human beings these are that can do this to another human being. If I don't get any insight into that question, really, what is the point? I'm wasting my time. And I became obsessed with this question, and determined as I was, I managed to get permission, unprecedented. This hadn't been done in India before. And I went into this maximum security jail and I sat and interviewed rapists for 31 hours. I interviewed the very men who had raped the girl on the bus. Or not every single one of them. One refused to meet me. One had committed suicide by the time I arrived. But I interviewed 3 of them, and I interviewed other rapists who I practiced on. And if that sounds bizarre and perverse to you, well, let me tell you why I had to practice. Because I'm one of the statistics, the 1 in 5 women who is raped or had attempted rape. And in my case, I was raped at the age of 18. And I was literally terrified that the one thing that would go wrong for me in making this film was that when I sat opposite these men, I would lose control and I would physically assault one of them, because I am so full of derision and hatred, so I thought, for men who do that, given my own experience. What happens if I can't control my anger? So I practiced on 4 other rapists, one of whom had raped a 5-year-old girl. So you can imagine, this was the darkest journey I've ever been on in my life. But let me tell you, I wouldn't have given up 1 second of that horror journey, not 1 second of it. And let me tell you that the surprises that greeted me along this journey, I could never have imagined. Because number one, I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry. I thought I was going to hit them before I went in. When I sit opposite them, I'm thinking, what the hell? These guys are ordinary, normal human beings. They're not the monsters I'm expecting. I was wishing they would be the monsters I was expecting, because that would have made more sense of it, right? And been more reassuring. But oh no, these were normal men. The prison psychiatrist described them as normal men with antisocial tendencies. What he meant was what I discovered, which was these men have been programmed to see women as subject to different regulations from men, to see women as subordinate to men. So from the moment they open their eyes in the world, they are taught by society, by their parents, by everything they see with their own eyes. A boy is born, sweets are distributed, and everybody celebrates. A girl is born, everybody comes around with long faces and comforts the mother and says, don't worry, next time God will bless you, next time it will be a boy. I mean, this is almost the first greeting a girl gets in the world, right? In many, many cultures. And this is not, by the way, we have to say this loud and clear, this is not peculiar to India by any means. This is the case with every single country in the world, I would say. It just differs as to how it's expressed and what the inequalities are. Are we paying women less? Are we raping women more? Are we telling women they can't go out after dark more? Whatever the expression of that discrimination is, every country in the world does it to a lesser or greater degree. Now, that discrimination is what I discovered to be utterly critical in this mindset that I was sitting and examining. Because the truth is that we keep as a world mistakenly seeing the violence as the problem. We see the violence as the cause of, not at all. The violence is just a symptom. The cause is the mindset. And we have to get this right if we're going to deal with it, if we're going to in any way find the solution for it. The root cause of violence against women, the root cause of any violence that is based upon looking at another human being and saying, you are of lesser value to me, therefore I can do this to you. I can snuff you out, I can behead you, I can rape you, I can throw acid in your face. You are of less value than I am. And socio-cultural thinking teaches this to children. These discriminations, the discriminatory mindset is passed on from one generation to the next. And there is no point in us dealing with the fallout from this disease, putting plasters on wounds. We need to be surgeons. We need to cut out the root cause. So if the root cause is discriminatory mindset, as I found out, absolutely 100% it is, how do we re-educate a mindset? Well, through education, yes, because you can only re-educate that mindset. But what kind of education? That is the critical question. And this is the last thing now I'm going to say about that film, which was the gateway to discovering the solution, which is Think Equal. The last thing I'm going to tell you is this, that at a certain point, I looked at all these rapists who I'd interviewed for 31 hours. And I started basically computing what do all of them have in common in order to understand them. And I came to realize the first thing was that only one of them had finished secondary school. And therefore, I could say of all the others, they were uneducated. They had finished school at 11, at 13, at whatever it was, they hadn't finished school. So I felt quite satisfied with this one immediate answer that I had to my question. But 2 weeks later, there was a big problem with that. 2 weeks later, I was sitting interviewing their lawyers. They're lawyers who had the highest possible degree of access to education, not just secondary school, but university, and the best education, so-called, that you can get, made the rapists sound like angels. One of the lawyers actually said, if my daughter had behaved like that girl on the bus, and what he meant by that was that she was out after dark, she was with a boy who wasn't her husband or her brother, which meant she was a slut, quite simply. Girls who behave that way are bad girls. He said, if my daughter behaved like that girl on the bus, I would take her to my farmhouse, and in front of my whole family, I would pour petrol on her and burn her alive. This is a lawyer talking. This is a man who's had the highest degree of education it's possible to get. So what are we talking about when we say education is the only way we can change mindset? Well, it's true, there is no other way, but what kind of education? That is the crux of it. And that is where my journey in creating, researching, discovering, and galvanizing people and experts around this question and this subject began. So I remembered a quote from Mandela which flooded into my head. Firstly, Mandela had said, education is the most powerful weapon we have to change the world. Now, I'm trying to, yes, okay, so I've managed to, this is a still from the film. I want to get to the Mandela quote so you can see it. Yes, it's the most powerful weapon we have to change the world. But what did Mandela mean by education? Look at the quote at the bottom of this screen. He said, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. I will add, or her gender. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. And that is the crux of Think Equal, because I knew that I had sat in front of men who had been taught to hate. The reason I didn't feel any anger with them, despite having been a rape survivor myself, was because they were programmed like robots. Every question I asked them about, what's a good girl? What's a bad girl? What is the role of a woman in society? Every question they answered as though they had learnt it by heart from a textbook. They were programmed. So yes, of course, every human being has agency, but what kind of a start in life are we giving our children if we are sending them out into the world believing that a girl is subject to different rules, and if she behaves that way, actually she's asking for it, and boys are boys and entitled to certain things because, you know, boys will be boys, and so you put 2 and 2 together and you get, you know, well, I can take that because she's a slut, so I want it, I need it, I'll take it. You know, we are preparing our children to go out, to rape, to bully, to be depressed, to commit suicide. You know that suicide is the #1 killer of young men in the country I live in the UK, under 40, the #1 killer of young boys. And depression is the #1, it's the #2, soon to be, very soon to be, the #1 disease in the whole world, globally. So having experienced this quote of Mandela with my own eyes, seeing these men, right, who had been taught to hate, who were simply acting out, actually like good boys, what they had been taught. What they told me about that girl was that not only did she deserve what she got, they said they had a duty to teach her a lesson. This is how entrenched that thinking is, right? And this is why the world we have looks like this, littered with these kind of statistics. 150 million girls per year, victims of sexual violence. 300,000 plus children under 18 exploited as boy soldiers. So, Think Equal's vision is a safe, free, and equal world. What Think Equal proposes to do to achieve that vision is to ensure that there is a system change in education that brings in what we believe is a missing subject, a missing third dimension to education. We say it is not enough to teach our children numeracy and literacy. That is a product of an education system that we've had for more than 200 years, which my research showed me was invented in and for the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution. And it hasn't been revised since. And basically, what that education system was designed to do was to put our children in factories. Nothing to do with leading a decent life, a dignified life. Nothing to do with having the kind of empathy, inclusion, sense of fair play, gender equality, peaceful conflict resolution. In a moment, I'll show you a heart with all the 25 competencies and skills that Think Equal deems it critical to teach our children so they have a foundation for relationships and to value each and every person. And so we basically ask education ministries, because we need to scale this work, of course, so we work top down and bottom up. We squeeze from every direction we can. And we say to them, look, how can you, if you genuinely have a duty of care to the children of your country, how can you deem it to be compulsory to teach those children numeracy and literacy, but you say it's optional, or worse, even arbitrary as to whether they will learn to value another human being or not, to learn how to lead healthy relationships? This surely has to be the core purpose of early years education. So you will see here in our mission statement, it's children between 3 and 6 that we target. And the reason we do that is that research shows overwhelmingly that what you are at 6, you will be for the next 80 plus years, right? In terms of certain aspects of brain development, and they are habitual ways of responding. I'm going to show you a graph in a moment. Here's the graph. See that dark blue line? That's called habitual ways of responding. See how that line peaks actually around 2, it's still high at 3, starting to drop, 4, 5. Look what happens at 6, it's flat lines. Because the neuroscientists have mapped the brain now, they know absolutely, even if the brain continues to be neuroplastic and you can continue to change it, in terms of certain conditions that are foundational, whatever habits you have in terms of ways of responding at 6 are pretty much what you have to fight against for the rest of your life, if they're bad habits. Emotional control, same story, that pink line, look at that. Empathy. Neuroscientists believe that if you have not made in the physical architecture of the brain the empathetic connections, neurologically speaking, so that you have the neural pathways that light up with empathy, you can't manufacture this later on. You need to have these foundations in life. Now, the first thing I did was I gathered together experts, because I certainly recognized I was no such. And people like Sir Ken Robinson, Meryl Streep is a patron rather than an academic expert or partner, but the rest are all experts in their field. So Urvashi Sani from India is an expert in empowering girls education. Dr. Mark Brackett, who founded the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, is an expert in emotional intelligence, and that means 2 things. Emotional literacy, which is critical for us to recognize emotions and the gradations of emotions. When is it appropriate to be angry rather than frustrated? And on the other hand, emotional intelligence involves regulating your emotions. We have Dr. Sheila Wamahil from Kenya, Barbara Isaacs, UK, Montessori, Vicky Colbert, who some of you may know from Colombia, Fundación Escuela Nueva. I mean, geniuses here, really. Professor Richard Davidson, who is a neuroscientist. We have best practice wherever we could find it. We incorporated best practice from these genius brains who were generous enough to allow us to bring their work into our curriculum for free. Because, as we'll discuss more in a moment, we do not charge for our materials or our training. Obviously, there is a cost of putting Think Equal into schools. The materials have to be printed, the trainers have to be flown there, but we don't charge premiums on top of that. Because we need to scale it, and we don't want to start a system where schools that can afford to have this critical foundation in life get it, and those who can't don't. So on we go. Here are some of our amazing partners. We have now partnered with UNICEF in Mexico, in the 4 states that Lucia mentioned earlier, and they are Ciudad de Mexico, Estado de Mexico, Jalisco, and Chihuahua. In those states, UNICEF is funding those 4 states, and we're with Enseña por México, Teach for Mexico. We have partnered with Scholas. I've literally yesterday came back from Rome from 3 hours with the Pope, and it was quite extraordinary. We're working together on a global pact for education to bring value-based education front and center into the education system where it belongs. Okay, obviously I'm not going to go through all of that. These are the countries that we're in. So I'll just zip through the continents: Africa, Kenya, Botswana, South Africa. We are in partnership with government in Botswana and in South Africa, and working on Kenya. We are in developed as well as developing countries. We're in Canada, the US, Singapore, we have implemented in, Australia, we're on fire in, etc. Again, I won't go through all of this because you can visit the website and get all that information there, but this is just to give you an overall idea. So let's just talk about how this program looks, because it's one thing to be intentional. And let me tell you, we're at a stage now where being intentional, I believe, it's obviously a good thing, but it's almost a waste of time. I mean, if I tell you how many conferences I go to where I'm hearing the same thing said this year, as was said last year, as was said in my first year there, if I tell you about the number of countries that I'm engaging with, where I look at their early childhood framework, and they have them now, they realize, because the OECD has come out and said, okay, they call it 21st century skills, what we call social and emotional learning, or competencies and skills, they call 21st century skills. Now, fine, I don't care what you call it, just give it to the children, because it's critical. I find it faintly ridiculous, frankly, that it's called 21st century skills, because that implies we didn't need it in any other century, really. Anyway, put that aside. I don't mind, as I say, call it what you will, but give it concretely. Because the problem with these education frameworks is they give you lists. This is what you should teach the children: critical thinking, resilience, problem solving. You can well imagine that a lot of them are still stuck in the old style definition of education, which is to create children for the labor market. We're talking about something much more profound and critical and fundamental than that. So nonetheless, an education framework only reaches out with the intention to do that. They're saying to the teachers, this is what you have to do. Here is the theory, here is the pedagogy. Now, most teachers in most countries in the early years are not trained. They're not respected. The fact is, we've been treating early childhood as babysitting years, as years where children can play. We'll look after your children while you go off and make more money, which after all, we tell people is the purpose of life. And the children are not getting what they need. In the homes, they are getting discrimination passed down. So if their parents happen to not like people with darker color skins, they pass that down to their children. If their parents believe that girls are second class and don't deserve as much education or food or whatever it is, or attention as boys, that is how they're going to grow up. So we need tools, not just objectives. We need the actual tools. And that is what we did. So we brought these experts together. We took what there was, and believe me, there's very little for the early years. So we had to create a lot. We've spent 3 years creating 80 narrative picture books illustrated from people from all over the world, so that children from the start see people as they are in all their diversity and glory and beauty. We have 90 lesson plans per level. So the structure of this is 3 levels: level 1 for 3 to 4-year-olds, level 2 for 4 to 5-year-olds, and level 3 for 5 to 6-year-olds. And every level has 23 books in each level. Every week has 3 lesson plans. That's 90 lesson plans in each level, and a booklet of resources that works with the books and the lesson plans. And the program has to be taught in order, and the teachers who get it for free, we never charge schools or teachers for this. We have to raise money either from government or from philanthropies, or in some cases UNICEF or World Bank has paid in Macedonia. But we find various ways, and we have some extraordinarily generous, enlightened, visionary human beings. And actually 7 of them I just took with me to one of the series of meetings we had with the Pope at the weekend, because people who do this, I mean, my heart is just completely conquered by people who have that degree of purpose. And we're lucky enough to have quite a few of those. So basically, we'll go straight to this slide, I think, because this is the important stuff, right? This is what we teach. And we teach it concretely. We teach it with tools, with pictures, with exercises and games and role play. Self-confidence, mindfulness. Mindfulness, we have, in each year, we have one 6 or 7 week program, which is structured and looped throughout the year's program. In the case of 2 of these programs, they were written by the Dalai Lama and Emory University, or the Dalai Lama and the Institute for Healthy Minds at Wisconsin-Madison University, and they are the most magnificent programs. Empathy, we teach empathy through literature, through the narratives of these books. You can't teach empathy in any other way. You can't wag your finger at your child and say, you know, you really should put yourself in that person's shoes and think about how they're feeling. You need to take story and character. As an ex-filmmaker, I know this. And you need to squeeze their little hearts, you know, and make them see the world through the eyes of that girl in the wheelchair who's sitting and watching that game that she can't take part in. Whatever the story is, and we cover all of these. I hope you've been reading them as I've been talking. Let me say that anyone who wants any part of this to look at in more detail, or wants this PPT, just reach out to Laura, let me know, and we will, you know, we'll send you anything you want to see in greater detail. So I'm going to start skipping through a few things because I'd love us to really have enough time to have questions here. There, you know, the outcomes, I think, you know, you've clearly appreciated: decreased negative attitudes and behaviors, and improved pro-social attitudes and behaviors. Decreased stress. I mean, this program really is about public health. It is now absolutely proven that stress in early childhood is as big a predictor as any other predictor of cardiovascular disease in adulthood. Public health, mental health, gender-based violence, all types of violence, depression, suicide, bullying. I mean, literally, we have designed this program to ensure that our children will have the foundation for positive outcomes in life. And I actually call this program a vaccination. And it's a vaccination because what we're dealing with here is an epidemic of discrimination and violence. And when we have an epidemic, we don't just deal with those who are sick. We try to prevent people from becoming sick in the first place. This is a Yale interim report of a program we ran in Botswana, where we had an RCT to measure. Again, I'm more than happy to send people. This was an extraordinary result, this particular RCT, and showed massive decreases in anger and aggression in the children who had Think Equal, decreases in stress and anxiety levels, and increase in pro-social behaviors. There is so much research over the past 50 years about how teaching social emotional learning to children in early childhood lasts for the rest of their lives, because the neuroscientists aren't idiots. They know when they say the foundation needs to be put in before the age of 6, what they're talking about. We just haven't been doing it. So again, if anybody wants, I've got a pile that thick of studies that have been carried out throughout the world in the last 50 years by Nobel laureates, etc., that prove the concept of this. I'm not going to go through any of the pedagogy. You know, you can see there are some beautiful diagrams here that we could be spending time on. We're taking individual narratives, and through empathy, tolerance, diversity, etc., we are creating a new collective narrative for these children and their peers. We have this degree or level of detail about how the program and its pedagogy has been mapped out. It's been a very, very serious endeavor over the last 3 years, and with amazing people, which is why it's turned out to be so brilliant. Basically, the action part of a lesson plan, which you see at the bottom here, is written in the most prescriptive form you can imagine. You have line by line and in bold so the teacher can follow easily what the instructions are from one moment to the next in terms of what questions to ask the children about the book that she has read, what to point out, what to invite the children to discuss, to role play, etc. And it has to be prescriptive because we can't allow our children to be the victims of, as it were, teachers who aren't great, who aren't trained, who aren't paid enough, who are bored, who aren't clever enough. The children need to get this, and we need to get this into their hearts and educate their hearts, not just their minds, with concrete step-by-step. That's why I call it a vaccination, because teachers can't go wrong. They only need to be able to read. These are examples of some of the resources. You see, you know, the occupation cards are all about showing them that girls and boys, same occupations. You want to be an astronaut, you're a girl, great. You're a boy, great, no problems. Doctors, scientists, etc. Fathers, mothers, all taking part in rearing children. We show the world as it should be. This is one of my favorite exercises. I wish I could, well, you know what, I'm going to do the quickest version of it because I just love this so much. This is where we teach the children, and actually we do this in week 1 with the 3-year-olds, where we teach the children that when they say that the girl in the top left-hand corner there, the blonde girl, we ask children, you know, do we all have hair? And they say yes. And then we ask them, do they all have the same color hair and the same type of hair? And then they discuss how, no, they don't, right? And then we do the same with eyes. And then we talk about skin. And we say, do we all have skin? Yes, we do. They say, do we all have the same color skin? No. But even if they say yes, the teacher has this resource to show them. And so the children will be asked, what is the color of the girl in the top left-hand corner there? And they will say white. Inevitably, I promise you, they will say white. So the teacher then says, okay, can you see that border above the girl on the paper? What color is that? And they'll say white. And she'll say, that's right. So if that's white and she's white, they must be the same color. Are they the same color? We realize they're not. We look at the little girl in the middle there and we ask, what color is she? And the children will inevitably say black. And the teacher will then ask, okay, if she's black, can anyone tell me what color her hair is then? So what we've understood pretty quickly here is nobody is actually white and nobody is actually black, right? So we need to now find out what colors are human beings, because when we tell them that we're black and white, divided, and everything negative in language is black, the black heart of the villain, the black sheep in the family, the black mark against your name, and the white chorus of angels singing in heaven, you know, we're doing something to the psyche of our children, right? So we take 2 hands, we color them in with 1 brown pencil, light brown, dark brown, and when we test those against the skins, we find out that every single person here in these pictures is brown. Brown matches them. Either the light brown or the dark brown is closer. So we know we're all brown, we're just different shades of brown. It's that kind of specific, detailed, concrete learning that we give the children. And that is how we create these neuropathways in the brain that are inclusive, that are loving. We teach them to love, not hate. The Ruler program from Yale teaches emotions. That's, it's a beautiful resource. This teaches self-regulation. Again, it's from Yale. And the Kindness Garden is part of what the Dalai Lama and Professor Richard Davidson's kindness curriculum includes. So these are just some examples. And you have the choice now to decide. I want to end with this beautiful quote of Aristotle, which says, education of the head without education of the heart is no education at all. And I believe that with all my heart, and I'm seeing that with my own eyes. When we hear from the teachers how little children come into school as a 3-year-old racist, a 3.5-year-old unbelievably violent child who bit and drew blood from another child. And these are turned around within a matter of months. It is a crime for us not to be doing this with every single child in our world.
I love listening to you every time, and I've listened to you so many times. But actually, the first question is about the documentary. They're asking, it says, Leslee, I read that your documentary was banned in India. Could you please say a few words about why so-called feminist groups denounced your work and how we can accelerate the effect of education without having to wait for a new generation?
Right. So 2 questions there. First of all, I was as shocked as any human being could be when I discovered on a panel at Oxford University, where there was one of these Indian feminists who had come out against the film, unbeknown to me at the time, that it was the feminists who called on the government to ban the film. Now you could have blown me over with a feather, right? The reasons that I've been given since then, and then I'm going to come to the reason I was given when I called her out in front of 200 Oxford students and asked her, how dare she call herself a feminist if she has called for the ban of a film, asks for an end to violence against women? What could her reason possibly have been? And I'll tell you what she answered in front of 200 plus witnesses. Apart from that, I have experienced the following answers to give them, a full hearing. They said that, number one, I didn't give, the rapists were going to be prejudiced by the interviews with them. Now, they were completely, by that time, convicted and sentenced. I had got opinions from lawyers, Supreme Court retired judges, High Court judges, all of whom said there is no question of prejudice any longer. The Supreme Court is the last court of resort that will hear their appeals against their death sentence, and the Supreme Court is only allowed to take account of what has been said in the lower court. And anyway, I'm not an idiot. I didn't put things in that I could have put. Believe me, I had so much evidence that if I had wanted to be sensational, I would have put in. I had evidence of things being fabricated, okay? And I didn't do any of that. I was very responsible. But the reason the woman gave me, Dr. Devki Jain gave me, when I said to her, how could you call yourself a feminist? She said, you want to know why I was so angry with you? I'll tell you why I was so angry with you. And I screamed back, tell me why you're so angry with me. And she said, because you chose the 8th of March. I had to explain to the students that the 8th of March, International Women's Day, was the day I chose for 7 countries to hold hands and to broadcast the film simultaneously, so that the statement I was making to the world is, this doesn't only happen in India, this happens in all parts of the world, and we all have to own this problem. And I turned to her and said, of course I chose the 8th of March. And she said, word for word, you knew how many events we had planned on that day. Can you imagine? Can you imagine saying? So I'm sorry, when it comes down to it, people, not feminists, I'm a feminist, I love feminism. That woman is a human being with frailties, and her frailty made her egotistical, territorial. The other thing that, was heaped upon me by the Indian feminists was that I'm not of their color or of their culture or of their country. And how dare I come in and criticize India only? Well, of course, I wasn't criticizing India only. At the end of my film, if you see it, there's a roll call of statistics from all countries around the world showing that everyone is guilty of this. So that was the reason for that. As far as the question on education, what can we do without having to wait a generation? Nothing. Nothing. I swear to you, I know this is the truth. We cannot. What are we going to do? Spend billions and sessions of therapy in trying to change people who are completely entrenched in their discrimination? It's worthless. We can try and help it along. We can ameliorate it. And thank God there are amazing organizations that are doing that and trying to work with parents and trying to work as they can, to make things a bit better there. But what kind of insane lunatics are we if we don't, when we have the tools now and they cost so little? We're about to go out to half of Botswana, okay, 50% of every reception class, every 4-year-old in one whole country of Botswana. Okay, it's not the biggest country in the world, but it's not the smallest. Do you know how much that is costing? To give this for one whole year, and it's costing this not just for 1 year, it's costing this until the materials fall apart for 10 years, $250,000. And thank God there is a human being in this world called Jennifer Gross, who has just pledged to give that money to fund those children in Botswana. Can you imagine? Why would we be trying not to get it right from the beginning? At the same time as other people are dealing with the fallout, we have to do this. We have to do both. It's not an either-or scenario.
Yeah. Actually, they also asked, someone else is asking, Paula Jares, have you tried the program in children in other age groups or even adults? Because it's always a question of whether we can also re-educate the mindset of the parents, right?
Yeah, well, the problem is, I genuinely believe, I have to be honest, right? I don't believe that without an enormous amount of effort and billions, if not trillions, we can get to the parents. And if we can, how many can we get to? The point is that children between 3 and 6, their character is actually being formed. So we can form it. It's a question of physical neuroscience. We're creating the brainwaves. We're making them think a certain way. We're making them think that this is not wrong, that there are answers on the sides, critical thinking. We're giving them these skills, and we're doing it very easily and very cheaply at that age. In our partnership with Scholas, which is the Pope's NGO, they are bringing their youth, who they work with, into our little ones' classrooms. So we're creating this beautiful reciprocal, sort of a mentorship with an older child who is a godfather or godmother, as it were, to the little children. And they read the stories and they help the teachers, teacher ratio. But will I spend an energy of my time on anyone above the age of 6? I won't. I can't. I have little time left. I'm 62 years old, and I'm going to do this to my last breath. So I'm going to do it where it counts, and it counts with those little ones. That is where we're creating dignified and beautiful heart. So that is where I'm going to put my energy, only there.
Asha is asking, how can this be delivered to the children who do not have access to preschools?
Okay, so we do deliver in rural areas, in communities. In India, for example, we have the program, and it is, it's being taught in all sorts of settings. Some of the public state schools, some voluntary schools, and some literally in a couple of remote communities. In KwaZulu-Natal, it's taught in early childhood centers in incredibly remote areas. We're in discussion in the US, actually, about bringing this into homes where children congregate in sort of care groups in more sort of underprivileged areas. Although, believe me, teach it to every child. This is not for underprivileged children. It's for every single child. I hope that answered that question. We'll go wherever we can. The reason really we've chosen school is because we can get in and change the system. And once we are plugged in, ideally, compulsorily, that is what we ask for. Belize has agreed. Deborah Domingo, who is the Minister of Education of Belize, has agreed to give this to every child in Belize compulsorily. There will be no choice. So that is what we're aiming for, because we can reach much wider that way. But we will go anywhere where there are children between 3 and 6.
And exactly. And also they're asking, just to clear that, in what languages this program is taught?
Okay, we have it translated into 11 languages so far. And depending on where we are, for example, in Botswana, although the majority of the population speaks Setswana, although there are many languages spoken there, the government didn't even want it in the main language of the country. They wanted it in English because they want the children learning English. Right. So we tell the teachers in a case like that, please be alert and try to translate into mother tongue if you see a child is lost, but otherwise they're teaching it in English. In KwaZulu-Natal, it's in Zulu. In Sri Lanka, where we have 630 schools so far, that is 14,400 children. And we're about to roll out, fully funded now, since the weekend at the Vatican. We're now fully funded to roll out to another 1,100 schools in Sri Lanka. That is one whole district of Sri Lanka. There we have it in Tamil and in Sinhala, and it's translated. We have it translated into Hebrew for Israel. We're in Portuguese, Spanish, Mexican Spanish. So yeah, 11 different languages we have it in.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. They're also asking me, Daniela said, is there any chance to get this program to refugee camps?
Yes, 100%. Now look, here's the thing. We are talking to Education Cannot Wait and to UNICEF about getting it in there. What we need for that is we need funding just to adapt the program. Because remember, we're not experts in trauma. And we cannot be irresponsible and just take the program as it is and plug it into the refugee settings, because every one of our books and every one of our lesson plans needs to be gone through a clinical psychologist who has expertise in trauma. Because the last thing we want to do is run the risk of re-traumatizing a child who's lost a parent or seen his or her mother raped or, has been abused. We can't be all things to all children, and we don't have that expertise. I know that a lot of our tools will help. No question, they will help. And Michelle, who is Michelle May, who is the mental health practitioner and expert for Education Cannot, specializing in refugee settings, has seen all the materials and says, no question, this is going to be helpful in refugee camps, and that's why they want it. But we do need some funding, and UNICEF can only fund on the ground the actual implementation. They can't fund us to create it. So that's one thing I'm looking for, is funding. It'll take us maybe 3 months at most to transform our 3 levels into one level that is safe, particularized for refugee settings. And why I say one level is because in refugee settings as well, you don't have this division between 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds in different classes. You have one class with children from 3 to 12. So it does need adaptation. It'll take us about 3 months to do that. And as soon as we have the funding for that, we're going to do it, and we're going to get started. Probably in Uganda with Education Cannot Wait and UNICEF. Yeah.
That's amazing, Leslie. And also, they are asking for you to send the link. They want to see the film. Some of the people with us today haven't seen the film. So that is something also that is important for, for you to do for us, because we all want to see it.
Oh, how much money do we need to adapt to refugee camps? I need to check. Can I come back to you on that? It's not going to be much. I'd be amazed if it's more than I'm going to take a running jump now and say around $60,000. I'd be amazed if it's more than that. But I do need, it may be less, if it's more, to be a tiny bit more. I really think that is probably the right ballpark figure, but I need to make sure that I've looked at a detailed budget on that, and I can't remember it. I know we've done it, but I can't remember it. But I will. So I can see who that question came from, and I will make sure, I'll make sure that you get that figure.
There were some other questions also regarding testimonials. If you had them, if you can share with us testimonials.
Oh, yes, for sure. Tia, can you jot these down for me? The link to the film and testimonials. And also, shall I send you the Botswana? I may as well. I'll listen. I'll send you a few things. Here's how we'll do it. I'll send you maybe 4 or 5 things. I'll send you that heart that tells you everything we teach. I'll send you a curriculum matrix, which shows week by week, what are we teaching? And you just decide. If it's too much information, ignore it. But dip into whatever you think interesting.
At the beginning, I said how sometimes we all know that education and the way that you're doing things, but it's important for us to know. I know now, but each one of us, from wherever we are from, wherever we come from, what we're doing, how can we help Think Equal? How can we support Think Equal?
There are so many ways. I mean, look, the most obvious thing to say is, going back to Vivina's question, obviously without funding, we can't do any of this. Now, thank God we are funded on programs rather well. So I've just given you an example. We've got the $250,000 we need in one check for one massive-hearted human being, an amazing woman, who I've only known for 2 weeks. I mean, you know what? This is also the amazing thing about this journey I'm on. I am meeting the best human beings that exist on this earth. And I'm meeting them briefly and quickly. And they are filling me with so much hope and optimism. Anyway, bottom line is, on programs, we're good. We're not that on core costs. That's where we struggle. And I think every organization does, because people like naturally to say, well, I'm paying for this program in this country because that matters to me. Well, without being able to fund our core team, we can't actually carry out any of the programs. So, you know, any of you know who might be interested in this work and might be generous enough to think about donating over time or bits here, or the critical thing, then we need expertise. So if anyone knows someone who would pro bono help us with marketing, we need a comms and marketing person. I mean, can you imagine? I've come back from the Vatican with pictures of me and the Pope and our supporters and some of our patrons howling with laughter. I mean, pictures that are just priceless, right? He made such a fantastic joke and we all collapsed with laughter, including the Pope, right? He's an amazing, wonderful man. We've come back with these stunning photos, and we actually, all we can do is drip out here and there. We haven't got that many followers because we don't spend the time on our branding, because we're so few and we're so busy doing the actual work. So we need these things. We need, you know, if there was someone who was an expert clinical psychologist who would help us pro bono, that would bring the price down of, you know, adapting for the refugee settings. We also have books that we'd quite like to sell, never to schools, never to teachers, but to homes. Well, we need a business brain. We're not business brains from the point of view of selling something and doing well in it, you know. So expertise we need. We need a finance officer. We need someone now for 2 days a week who knows about accounting, and accounting for charities, to help our finance director, who's now overworked because we're in 14 countries. We're with 38,000 children. We're busy, and we're a small group. So that's other ways that can help. And of course, last but by no means least, if you know ministers of education, if you know people of influence in particular countries, or heads of state, or, vice presidents, what have you, persuade them, tell them that this is the legacy they have to leave to the children of their country. And they can get this from us at a cost that is negligible, that is ridiculously cheap. It works out, I think, at scale at something like $2 per child. Can you imagine being able to transform your society at that kind of ridiculous no cost? Everybody should be doing this, no question.
Well, thank you, Leslie. Laura, I don't know if you want to add anything, but thank you so much. Your passion is always so contagious. So up for a new day of hard working for children.
Well, as always, Leslie, this has been really riveting, and we will definitely, as Be Women, help you quite a bit in all our group of business women. We all have all those professions. So we will make sure that everybody listens to this program, and there will be a lot of people. We have Belen on staff who really does a great job with social media, will help you with the Pope and everything you're doing, because you are really the seed to create actual change in our society. It's no longer good to have people to read, write, and do math. They have to learn social emotional skills. And on that note, I know we passed the hour, but I think that it has been the most interesting and most inspiring and call to action that really will create a change in our society. So on that, I would like to close the talk by saying that thank you all of you, and this recording will be passed to many people. But Be Women is all about values, care, and connection. That's what we are all about. So I hope we can embrace Think Equal in the best possible way. So the upcoming, what we do is we do a lot of webinars every week, but the upcoming webinars will be in January, and will be mostly with on January 14th with Investing in Women-Run Businesses model by Vicky Saunders, CEO of SheEO, an amazing and inspiring woman who is creating real impact with women-led for-profit businesses. The next one will be about impact investment with a gender lens, something that has happened in the last 2 years in a magnificent way that is unbelievable. And so finally, women are getting funding. Very little still, like 7 to 10%, believe me, it's very short compared to what men are getting, but that's okay. We are happy because it's moving. And then we have, one of our mottos is that we as Be Women or Mujeres B, we are like imaginal cells. So we will have Kim Pullman talk about imaginal cells and the golden rule on January 21st. Then on the 28th of January, we will have another amazing PhD on women's values and how important the right brain that has been kind of not being used in science for the last 5,000 years is the predominant side of women, that is intuition. And she has done the studies with the girls, teenage girls and girls from 8 years old on, and shows how women will be connecting with the intuition and the value of the right brain. You will love that presentation. And then on February, we start with more technical things because we are about metrics. It's a SDG Action Manager is another tool to measure how companies are actually working to work together with the 17 SDGs. And then we have a few more coming, all about sustainable fashion by Annie Mana, and also compras públicas for triple bottom line companies, meaning the government is implementing laws in which they first favor companies that are triple bottom line for their procurement. So the movement of a triple bottom line is a must. And on that, I would like to thank everybody on the line and really believe that this movement of Be Women, that is actually a movement of women of action. No more complaining. It's all about putting up your sleeves and doing something in a big way. And with a big smile, I want to thank you all for being here. And we will be doing amazing things in the next 3-4 years. You will see that. Thank you, all of you.